Behind locked palace doors, a royal inheritance quietly shifted the future of the monarchy, and no one was prepared. Prince Louis, the youngest child of Prince William and Princess Catherine, has unexpectedly become heir to the Duke of Kent's vast estate, stunning courtiers and sending shockwaves through the corridors of royal power. But why was this decision made in silence? And more importantly, why were Prince Andrew's daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, deliberately excluded? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It began with a whisper, an anonymous tip that confidential legal documents had been filed under seal, transferring the Duke of Kent's properties to someone far removed from the expected line of succession. The name that surfaced wasn't Prince Edward, nor even a distant Kent descendant. No, it was Prince Louis of Wales, a child not yet burdened by royal duty, suddenly named as the successor to one of the most historical estates in the monarchy's possession. For weeks, silence hung thick in the air at Buckingham and Kensington. But beneath that silence, the gears of strategy, rivalry, and old resentment had been turning for years. Rumours swirled of clandestine meetings between the Duke of Kent and a select circle of senior royal advisors, including those loyal to King Charles and, more curiously, Princess Anne. These gatherings were not noted in official calendars, and their purpose remained concealed until now. Sources close to the estate's legal team suggest that the Duke had grown increasingly disillusioned with the way certain branches of the royal family were evolving, particularly the public controversies shadowing the Yorks. This quiet storm had been building, unseen but potent, and now it had burst wide open with the naming of a child, barely old enough to comprehend the weight he was being handed. The first public ripple came from within the palace itself. Insiders reported visible tension during a closed-door gathering when the documents were discreetly acknowledged among a select few royals. Prince William was said to be stunned, not at the favour his son had received, but at the sheer magnitude of what it would ignite. Princess Catherine, however, remained composed, her silence interpreted by some as shock, by others as strategic anticipation. From that moment on, the divide between the Wales and York households became undeniable. Courtiers who once navigated loyally between both now found themselves choosing allegiances. Behind this legal upheaval was another reality, one tied to the Duke's declining health. In the final months of his life, he became increasingly reflective, seeking to ensure that his estate would serve not just tradition, but transformation. The amended documents, updated shortly before his condition worsened, bore only one name: Louis Arthur Charles. No explanations, no attachments, just a deliberate redirection of power. Many believe it was his way of setting a course correction, of placing trust in the future, not the past. But perhaps the most emotional fallout came from those left behind. Eugenie and Beatrice, often sidelined by the firm but never entirely dismissed, reportedly broke down in disbelief when the news reached them. They had, after all, spent their lives walking the tightrope between public duty and private rejection. This latest decision didn't just shut them out, it erased them from a legacy they believed was rightfully theirs. Friends close to the York sisters describe a mixture of devastation and betrayal. And yet, no formal challenge has been issued. Not yet. But the whispers were only the beginning soon. Accusations, secrets, and ancient promises would begin to unravel the palace's carefully preserved image. Why Prince Louis? A boy barely beginning his royal journey, yet now steward of one of the monarchy's most historical titles and lands. Sources close to the Duke of Kent reveal a story far deeper than mere affection. It was legacy, vision, and unfinished business that led to this shocking choice. The answer begins not with Louis, but with the man who made the choice. The Duke of Kent, stoic, deliberate, and often overlooked by the public, was a figure who lived through the shifting sands of the monarchy's most fragile decades. He saw it all: abdications, scandals, reinventions, and in those long shadows, he forged a philosophy not built on nostalgia, but on survival. For him, titles were not ornamental, they were instruments of continuity. and by the time whispers began to circulate about the fate of his estate, the Duke had already decided that the next guardian of his legacy had to represent more than lineage. He had to symbolize redemption. Sources close to the Duke speak of his quiet admiration for Catherine, the Princess of Wales, a woman who navigated the brutal terrain of royal life with grace and strategy. In her, the Duke saw the elegance of the Queen Mother and the calculated dignity of Queen Elizabeth II. But more than that, he saw stability. When William rose beside her with renewed public trust, the Duke turned his gaze to their children: George, the heir; Charlotte, the strength. But it was Louis who captured something different, something unshaped, yet potent, the blank canvas upon which a new royal ideal could be painted. Louis, young and untouched by the firm's complications, became the embodiment of potential, uncorrupted, unburdened, unmarked. There were rumors hushed, but persistent, of a series of late-night conversations between the Duke and Princess Anne. Not casual chats, but intense discussions about the future of the royal bloodline, and what it meant to preserve it not just legally, but symbolically. One phrase reportedly recurred throughout those talks: purity of path. To those listening in, it seemed the Duke feared that centuries of sacrifice could be undone by a single misstep, by allowing power to pass into the wrong hands. Anne, the enforcer of tradition, did not argue. Then came the letters sealed away in the Duke's private library. Discovered only after his passing, the notes referenced an untainted heir who would carry forth the family legacy without the stain of scandal. Though no names were written, the implication was clear. The Duke's vision for continuity had narrowed to one figure, small in stature, but immense in symbolic value. Perhaps the most telling detail came not from a document or meeting, but from a story shared by a retired palace aide. Years ago, at a formal gathering, a toddler-aged Louis broke protocol and approached the Duke directly, babbling with childlike curiosity. Rather than being whisked away, he was allowed to sit beside the Duke for several minutes. The old man smiled rarely. That night, he reportedly said, "There, that one. He's untouched by the noise." It wasn't just affection, it was an awakening. But beneath all this admiration was a quieter war, a rivalry between two visions of royal preservation. On one side stood the old guard, including the Duke, Anne, and now increasingly, the Wales family. On the other, the Yorks embroiled in controversy, clinging to relevance, demanding inclusion. The Duke of Kent had seen enough. He made a decision not just to protect his estate, but to send a message, one that would echo across generations. But admiration alone can't explain a move so deliberate. It was a response to something darker, something buried. For Beatrice and Eugenie, the exclusion wasn't just a legal shock, it was a dagger to their royal identity. Raised within the firm's shadow, they were suddenly erased from a lineage they believed was theirs to uphold. And what followed was heartbreak, fury, and retaliation. When the official inheritance confirmation reached the York household, the silence that followed was deafening. Then came the fury. Sources close to Princess Eugenie say she was the first to break storming out of a private family gathering and making a direct call to King Charles that allegedly spiraled into a tense exchange. The details remain closely guarded, but one phrase keeps surfacing from those who were nearby. "You've made your position clear." For Eugenie, this wasn't about property. It was about principle. She had, for years, walked the tightrope between duty and dismissal, constantly reminded that her position was royal, but optional. Now, that balance was gone, and in its place stood rejection, carved in legal stone. Beatrice, the more reserved of the two, turned to quieter, but no less potent forms of expression. Within days of the story leaking, her social media activity became the subject of intense scrutiny. A cryptic post, a black and white photo of her younger self standing beside her grandfather, was interpreted by royal watchers as a silent protest. No caption, no hashtags, just silence that spoke volumes. Within hours, hashtags trended, rumors spun out of control, and the palace, caught off guard, scrambled to regain narrative control. But this wasn't just a media blip. The emotional divide was real, and it was raw. Insiders say the sisters began distancing themselves from their royal cousins, especially the children of William and Catherine. A bond once light-hearted and familial was now marked by tension and avoidance. At the centre of this quiet estrangement stood the growing perception that the monarchy was circling its wagons around the Wales family and casting the Yorks into the cold. Queen Camilla, usually a silent operator behind palace walls, was reportedly approached for mediation. But when asked for comment internally, she allegedly responded with a single word: unfortunate. To the York sisters, that silence was unforgivable. They expected defense, or at least empathy. They received none. The fallout was immediate. Beatrice declined an invitation to a high-profile event. Eugenie was spotted in Portugal days later, avoiding press altogether. Both women had been erased, not by scandal, but by strategy, and they knew it. The royal press offices attempted to contain the bleeding. Carefully worded statements spoke of deep familial love and appreciation for all branches of the family, but it was too late. Whispers began to swirl. This wasn't an oversight. It was deliberate. It wasn't about suitability. It was about survival. The Yorks, linked by blood to controversy and tension, had become liabilities in a monarchy fighting to reposition itself. And so, with surgical precision, they were cut away. And if it was strategic, then who was behind the maneuvering? And what were they trying to protect? In the shadows of this royal inheritance bombshell stands one unshaken figure, Princess Catherine. While others reel, she remains composed. But palace insiders believe this inheritance is just one part of a much bigger plan, one Catherine has been quietly steering for years. As the storm gathered around Louis's unexpected inheritance, the Princess of Wales neither flinched nor faltered. To the public, she smiled with trademark grace, appearing at charity events, school visits, and diplomatic receptions with her usual poise. But behind closed doors, those within the palace walls whispered of something far more calculated. Catherine, they say, was not caught off guard. She was steps ahead. Every move, every alliance, every gentle nod to tradition, it was all part of a deeper strategy. While the world focused on the immediate scandal, she was shaping the royal architecture of the next generation. Her influence had been growing slowly, but unmistakably. Over the past 2 years, Catherine had positioned herself at the heart of several key royal appointments, advising on patronages, restructuring outdated systems, and playing a decisive role in who was trusted with which titles. Many dismissed her involvement at first as symbolic, a figurehead lending her image to a crumbling institution. But soon, it became clear she was doing far more than lending support. She was quietly redrawing the blueprint. And now, with Prince Louis's inheritance, that blueprint had reached its first visible milestone. Modernizing royal values while fiercely protecting the bloodline's traditional essence, that was her balancing act. And no one has walked it better. Where others stumbled trying to adapt the monarchy to a changing world, Catherine embraced both sides. Her children, now at the center of royal future, represent a new era, but one that bows respectfully to the old. In private meetings, especially with Princess Anne and Prince Edward, she has pushed a vision of future-proofing. The monarchy ensuring that control remains consolidated, image remains polished, and loyalty remains within carefully selected hands. Louis's inheritance, then, is not just a symbol of favor, it's a power move. It shifts the internal hierarchy, cementing the Wales children as the uncontested core of the next royal chapter. What the public saw was a smiling mother. What they missed was the shifting of foundations. The inheritance created a ripple effect that quietly tilted the balance of succession influence. George remains the heir, Charlotte the stabilizer, but Louis? Louis is now the unexpected cornerstone, given control over legacy lands that once served as the backdrop of old royal power. With it comes wealth, autonomy, and symbolic dominance over even more senior royal cousins. It is, in the eyes of some, a recoding of the royal DNA. Every polished appearance by Catherine in the wake of the announcement now appears tinged with subtext. That subtle hand on Louis's shoulder, that shared glance with Anne, that carefully chosen wardrobe nod to Kent's tartan heritage. Nothing was accidental. Everything was signalling. And palace aides began to admit, some in admiration, others in alarm, this was not merely a reaction to events. This was orchestration. Controlled, elegant, silent, but seismic. But for every quiet rise, there's a louder resistance, and one man wasn't about to watch his legacy vanish in silence. Stripped of titles, humiliated in public, Prince Andrew had only one ambition left: securing his daughter's future. But with the Duke of Kent's estate slipping into Louis's tiny hands, Andrew erupts behind palace walls, accusing the monarchy of erasing his bloodline. What he does next shocks even his staunchest allies. The inheritance struck Andrew like a thunderclap. For years, he had been battling the slow erosion of his royal relevance, nursing wounds that came not just from scandal, but from what he saw as a systematic effort to cast him into permanent exile. But this was personal. To see his daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, sidelined while the crown handed centuries of Kent legacy to a child was, in his eyes, a declaration of war. He wasted no time. Courtiers recall a tense confrontation inside the palace walls, where Andrew demanded an audience with King Charles. What followed was described by one aide as the loudest silence in recent royal memory. Andrew leveled accusations of betrayal, questioning the family's unity and accusing his brother of allowing politics to poison blood. But it didn't stop there. In a moment of unfiltered fury, Andrew reportedly threatened to release decades of private correspondence and protected records that, according to his claims, would dismantle the public image. The monarchy had worked tirelessly to restore. Some dismissed it as a desperate bluff. Others weren't so sure. A senior advisor was allegedly dispatched that same night to assess what materials, if any, Andrew might actually hold. His sudden desperation had everyone on edge, including those who once quietly sympathized with his plight. Behind the scenes, legal murmurs began to echo through royal circles. An anonymous legal source hinted at an inquiry into whether the Duke of Kent had been unduly influenced in his final weeks. While no formal challenge was filed, paperwork had reportedly been drafted. The palace braced for a legal showdown, one that never publicly came, but its threat lingered like smoke over scorched ground. Whether it was leverage or a genuine move remains unclear. What is certain is that the monarchy was rattled, and Andrew had everyone's attention again. His emotional isolation drove him to seek refuge with Queen Camilla, hoping for mediation. But Camilla, known for her calculated distance, offered little more than polite nods and vague assurances. Andrew, it said, left that conversation colder than when he entered. That moment alone in a house where he was once second only to the heir marked a quiet turning point. There would be no hand extended from within the firm. If he was to fight for Beatrice and Eugenie, it would have to be from outside the circle. In the days that followed, whispers grew louder. Andrew met privately with his daughters, discussing their future in increasingly pragmatic terms. One source described the conversation as less about titles and more about legacy. He reportedly asked them whether they would ever walk away entirely, and though neither answered, the heaviness in the air signaled that nothing was off the table anymore. But perhaps most alarming were rumors of quiet alliances being formed. Conversations with minor royals, those long removed from the inner ring, began to surface. Exiled voices, disgruntled nobles, and those who had watched their influence fade began circling around Andrew's orbit. What started as a family drama was now morphing into something far more dangerous, a potential coalition of the disinherited. And though no banner was raised, the message was clear: he was not retreating quietly. As Andrew spiraled, others watched with alarm, and one royal elder finally stepped out of the shadows. She's known as the hardest-working royal, but when legacies are threatened, Anne becomes something else entirely, a guardian of the crown's deeper code. Upon learning of Andrew's attempts to overturn the inheritance, Princess Anne took matters into her own hands and left no room for debate. For decades, Princess Anne has been the monarchy's iron spine, quietly commanding, unshakably loyal, and utterly immune to theatrics. But beneath that no-nonsense exterior lies a figure who understands the ancient laws and unwritten codes of royal continuity more deeply than perhaps any other living royal. So when word reached her that Andrew was plotting to contest the Duke of Kent's final wishes, Anne didn't hesitate. There were no press releases, no outward signs of turmoil, just a flurry of discreet calls to trusted legal advisors and an unmistakable message passed through the corridors of the palace. The line would not be crossed. According to insiders, Anne convened a private legal review of the Duke's testament, ensuring every amendment had been made with full clarity and legal precision. The findings were unassailable, but it wasn't the law that Anne leaned on, it was the authority of tradition. In a tense, behind-the-scenes confrontation, Anne met Andrew with words that still echo among palace staff. The crown is not a consolation prize. You do not demand it. You protect it, or you step away. It was not just a rebuke. It was a warning, sharp, unyielding, final. Anne's support for Catherine in the weeks following the inheritance shock became increasingly visible, though carefully coded. Those closest to the royal council reported her presence in key meetings discussing the future of property, legacy roles, and royal hierarchy. While she offered no public endorsement, her influence loomed behind every major decision ratifying Louis's inheritance. At one critical gathering, Anne reportedly closed debate with a single sentence, "He is the future we won't regret." It was all that needed to be said. But the most striking revelation came not through official channels, but through a leak. A private letter, allegedly written by Anne to the late Duke of Kent shortly before his final estate modifications, surfaced among a select few royal correspondents. In it, Anne expressed her belief that the youngest may yet be the most enduring, and that Louis carried not just our name, but our repair. The letter was never confirmed, but no one close to the palace dared deny its authenticity. What followed was a wave of quiet reverence across the royal ranks. Even longtime skeptics of Anne's firm stance began to view her as something more, an arbiter of continuity in a crumbling age. As one senior advisor put it, "When everything seems to shake, Anne does not. That's why she stands alone." And so she did, unmoved by scandal, unfazed by rebellion, standing like stone as others circled in chaos. She hadn't just protected Louis's claim, she had cemented it with the force of legacy. But while Anne sealed one legacy, the Queen's ghost loomed ready to expose one final twist. A sealed envelope. A note written by Queen Elizabeth II, found tucked away in her Balmoral writing desk. Its contents, according to an insider, shocked even King Charles, and directly referenced Prince Louis. Could the Queen have played a part in the Duke's decision from beyond the grave? It began as a routine archival review, a quiet effort to catalogue personal effects at Balmoral following a period of transition. No fanfare, no press. Just a small team of trusted aides and a royal archivist sorting through drawers that had long remained untouched. But what they found halted everything. Inside a small leather-bound box was an envelope marked only with the Queen's monogram and the words, "To be opened by the sovereign alone." When it was delivered to King Charles, what followed behind palace gates was not protocol, but profound silence. Insiders say the letter was handwritten, unmistakably in the Queen's private script, and dated just weeks before her passing. And within it were words that changed the tone of the entire inheritance drama. Elizabeth, revered for her stoicism and guarded neutrality, had written something personal, emotional, almost prophetic. A section of the letter, as described by one palace source, referenced Louis not by name, but by spirit. "A vessel of continuity," she had written, "one who will walk forward carrying the burden of the past without the scars." Those who read it knew immediately who she meant. There was no ambiguity. The Queen had seen something in Louis, something untouched, unfiltered, and worthy of preservation. But what sent chills through the corridors of power was not merely her vision, it was what she left unsaid. The letter reportedly alluded to the instability she had quietly observed within the York line during her final years. A monarch who said little in public had clearly seen everything in private. From Andrew's scandals to the increasingly strained positioning of his daughters within the royal matrix, Elizabeth had noted it all. And while she never voiced it aloud, the letter appeared to confirm she feared what that instability could one day cost the monarchy. King Charles's reaction was reportedly emotional. One aide claimed he sat in silence for nearly an hour after reading it, eyes fixed on the page. Another described him quietly placing the letter in a personal safe, instructing that it be spoken of to no one outside his immediate circle. But it was too late. Word had already begun to leak. Whispers of the Queen's final wish began circling among courtiers. Some treated it as gospel, others dismissed it as rumour. But those who had seen the handwriting knew the truth. Elizabeth had spoken from beyond the veil. A private archivist, who'd handled the Queen's correspondence for decades, confirmed in confidence that the note was authentic. The strokes, the phrasing, the ink, all consistent with her most personal letters. The monogram was not the formal royal crest, but the one she used only in private reflections. It was real, and it was powerful. Yet, even with this confirmation, royal aides were given direct instructions. Its full content was to remain confidential. The public, and even some members of the family, were to know only fragments. The monarchy would not risk destabilizing its already fragile unity with a full reveal. But within those hidden lines, within those intimate words, something undeniable was solidified. The Duke of Kent had not acted in isolation. His decision had not been rogue. There was, somewhere behind the curtains of grief and legacy, the soft but deliberate hand of the Queen herself. And though her crown had passed, her influence had not. In death, as in life, Elizabeth had guided the crown's future with the precision of a sovereign who knew every move mattered. Whether written by fate or manipulation, the Queen's influence didn't end there because another document was about to change everything. Buried deep within the Duke of Kent's final will was a single clause amended weeks before his passing that rewrote centuries of royal precedent. A codicil so ironclad, not even the king could override it. And, at its heart, Prince Louis named, protected, and empowered. The clause wasn't just a legal detail. It was a declaration, a quiet, calculated strike designed to cement one legacy while extinguishing the claim of another. Marked with the Duke's personal seal and added in the final revision of his estate documents, it read with stunning clarity, "Henceforth, the estate, holdings, and legacy tied to the Kent lineage shall transfer to Louis Arthur Charles of Wales, excluding any future claimant descending from the York line." It was not just a rejection, it was an annihilation of a rival future. For the York camp, who had still held on to slivers of hope, this clause turned those slivers to ash. It wasn't phrased with malice, but with unmistakable finality. The door had been slammed and bolted. What stunned even the most seasoned royal watchers was the list of witnesses who had validated this amendment. Princess Anne, a royal historian with decades of experience, and the Duke's most trusted legal counsel. Each had signed off without objection. In fact, the amendment had reportedly been discussed in 2 private meetings, both occurring after Andrew's most recent attempt to regain public favour. It now appeared that the Duke had been quietly preparing for this move, waiting for the moment when the crown's internal stability demanded a sharper line between preservation and risk. When the clause was read aloud during the final estate meeting, those present described the atmosphere as glacial. The York sisters reportedly sat in stunned silence. No appeals, no protests, just quiet devastation as the words echoed through the marble halls. Even King Charles, who had expected controversy, appeared visibly shaken by the explicit language. Legal experts brought in by the Crown quickly concluded that the codicil's structure, reinforced by centuries-old property statutes, made it near impossible to challenge. It was binding, It was bulletproof. What followed was a curious mix of public backlash and public celebration. While some questioned the cruelty of the exclusion, an overwhelming wave of support surged behind Louis and, more importantly, behind Catherine. The narrative began to shift from scandal to strategy, from chaos to clarity. In the eyes of many, this wasn't just a will, it was a map, one that pointed toward the future of the monarchy, a future safeguarded from past mistakes. With the battle legally sealed, attention now turns to the future, because this was never just about inheritance. It was about who shapes the crown next. He's barely begun to understand the weight he now carries, yet Prince Louis has become a symbol of rebirth, restoration, and realignment. As the youngest Wales child becomes the torchbearer of an ancient estate, the monarchy braces for a new era, built on bold choices and painful exclusions. What began as a single clause in a single will has now set off a ripple effect far greater than the Duke of Kent could have imagined. Louis, once the carefree youngest of the Wales trio, now stands at the centre of a new royal chapter. His inheritance marks more than property, it's a deliberate reshaping of the crown's long-term strategy. It signifies the firm's shift away from maintaining optics and toward fortifying substance. With Louis's name etched into the Kent legacy, the royal family has sent an unmistakable message. They are planting their future in clean soil, free of past controversy, and rich with curated promise. This move has also reaffirmed what many already suspected: Catherine and William are no longer just heirs to the throne, but architects of its survival. Louis's sudden elevation solidifies their household as the nucleus of the modern monarchy. George may inherit the crown, Charlotte may shoulder ceremonial continuity, but Louis now carries legacy. His role, though symbolic for now, reinforces the idea that influence within the royal family is no longer dictated by birth order alone, but by trust, image, and purpose. It's also a declaration of permanent closure. For the York lineage, this marks the final curtain. With every official channel now reinforcing Louis's claim, there's no path back to central power for Andrew's branch. The exclusions, the legal fortifications, and the Queen's own ghostly endorsement have shut every door. What remains is a memory of what might have been, and the cold reality of what is. Anne's fingerprints, though subtle, remain ever present. Her orchestration behind the scenes, her unwavering allegiance to tradition, and her brutal clarity have ensured the monarchy did not drift. She held the line, redirected the future, and in doing so, became the silent queenmaker in a realm increasingly shaped by whispers and calculated will. Public sentiment has responded in kind. Louis is viewed not as a usurper, but as a reset. A clean slate, as one royal correspondent described him, a blank page on which the monarchy can rewrite its story. And while he remains years away from understanding the full gravity of what has been handed to him, the world now watches him with expectation, curiosity, and yes, even hope. But beneath the celebration lies a hum of unease. If such a shift could happen now, what might come next? What other moves are being drafted behind closed doors? What else lies buried in wills, letters, or private councils? Royal watchers agree. This may be the end of one battle, but it's only the first chapter of a deeper transformation. As palace gates close and lights dim, one truth remains. Every crown is shaped not by blood alone, but by those ruthless enough to choose who wears it next. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.